American dream is built on freedom, and that freedom comes at a cost. American Heroes Stories, presented by Life, Liberty, Happiness, is a new series honoring the men and women who've sacrificed to protect that dream. We're proud to play a small part in preserving their stories for future generations. Life, Liberty, Happiness, a Media Squatch podcast presents American Heroes Stories.
All right, we welcome to the program Air Force Master Sergeant J. McCoy.
Man, that intro was for me.
Yeah,
I was getting excited. Like, man, who we about to hear about?
That sounds legit.
That's a lot to live up to right there. But
That's brand new.
Yeah.
And when Emma goes away, that's what we get.
That's what we get.
Woody
Emma
comes through, and that's what a bumper. What a start.
Yeah,
Good job,
that's
Woody.
great.
Thank you.
Well, welcome to the program.
Glad to be here.
All right, start us off with your early beginnings. Where's home?
So home, I guess home will always be South Louisiana.
What part of Louisiana?
Little town you never heard of called Santima, Louisiana.
Okay.
I guess.
Now, where is that near or in relationship to Baton Rouge?
Yeah, it's about 25, 30 minutes south of Baton Rouge.
Okay.
About the same to New Orleans as the crow flies.
Okay. Gosh, I'm trying to think of the name. Like, so if you were to keep going south, there's one little beach where you can go fishing down there.
Did you really think one little bit that was going to describe?
We used to spend a lot of time out at Grand Isle.
That's it.
Yeah, Grand Isle.
Grand Isle.
Yep.
Yeah, because it's not a beach like you think.
I thought Louisiana has a long coastline.
It's all swamp.
Yeah, it's got a jacked up coastline because it's right there in the Mississippi Delta, so it's a lot of marsh. In Grand Isle, I like to say I'm spoiled rotten by beaches now because Grand Isle, right there at the mouth of the Mississippi, you've got brackish brown water, you got dead fish everywhere. But that was going to the beach as a kid, so we were pumped about it. And now you take me to, somewhere me and my family just spent a week in Emerald Isle, North Carolina. I'm like, this is beautiful.
Yeah, that's where I'm retiring to. I'm going down there, man.
Yeah, it's great.
That's awesome.
All right. So when you, like last week was deadly hot here, when you walk outside, are you like, this isn't heat?
You'd think so, but through the military and through my career, I've lived so many places. No, I consider myself a native Virginian at this point.
Okay.
As far as the temperature goes. I was stationed in Alaska at one point, and when I came back down south, went to go visit mom and dad in Louisiana. It was July, and my dad's like, hey, I need help setting up this deer stand. Come with me. And about 30 minutes in, I went and sat on the four-wheeler, and I'm like, Dad, you got to take me home. I'm about to pass out. And he thought I was joking. And I'm like, no, man, this heat's about to kill me.
Awful. Like I'm a Virginia boy, and I go down there, and I'm like, I can't take it. Like, there's no air moving. You can't hide from it.
Yeah. It's a wet, hot blanket all summer long.
Ugh. Man. All right. So you spend your whole childhood basically there. You graduate high school there. So out of high school, are you going straight into the military at that point?
Yeah, straight into the Air Force. I was delayed enlistment, so I actually signed my enlistment contract the summer between my junior and senior year of high school.
Okay.
So as fast as I could get into the military, I went. What
was the itch?
It's part of me thinks it was a calling. It's what I was put on this earth to do. 6 years old, I think I saw the Blue Angels fly for the first time, and I was hooked.
Heck yeah.
Oh, wow.
I was born in the 80s, grew up in the early 90s, and Top Gun,
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I feel like that was action movie culture.
Yeah.
It all went back to the military. It was either some former special operator or, you had movies like Top Gun, and I think it was Iron Eagles.
Yes.
There was one about helicopters that was super cool.
Now, are you picking the Air Force because of the pilot stuff? That's Navy, but how did you choose the Air Force over the other branches?
Good advice.
Okay.
Yeah, so early on as a kid, I did want to be a naval aviator and follow in Maverick's footsteps. And then obviously 9/11 happened. I'm still in school, and that really changed my trajectory. And seeing the war televised, the early parts, the invasion of Afghanistan, invasion of Iraq, I really wanted to be on the ground. I was aware enough to know as an aviator, well, the Afghan Air Force is non-existent. Saddam's Air Force, well, we took care of that for the most part in the Gulf War, and I don't think they recovered very well. But there wasn't a lot of dogfighting going on in the GWAT. So I wanted to be a ground guy, and early on, late middle school, high school time frame, I'd kind of switched and just was infatuated with the Marine Corps and everything that the Marine Corps stood for. But my dad, he was a law enforcement officer for 27 years, and obviously in that community, he worked with a lot of veterans. He wasn't a veteran himself, but I think half of his crew at any given time were veterans, and a lot of combat veterans. And so, between him being a father and wanting to protect his son, and just like I said, good advice from a lot of his coworkers, he said, man, have your boy join the Air Force. They've got the best schools, they've got the best living conditions, they get the best deployments. The Air Force is where he needs to go, So it was really that paternal advice from my dad and his coworkers. And I think the final nail in the coffin, I had a really good friend growing up named Anthony. He and I were like brothers. And he had an uncle that had served in the Air Force and went on to start his own private security company and was doing really well for himself. And he sat me down one day and explained his job as a OSI special agent in the Air Force. And I want to say he was responsible for protecting the program, the classified program around the SR-71 Blackbird. And I just thought that was super cool. I didn't know, you could do that in the military. And he described it as counterintelligence. And I go back to that movie, A Few Good Men. And there's a scene in that movie where Jack Nicholson's number 2, his XO, he kind of goes off the map. And somebody makes a comment in that movie, and they're like, that guy, he spent X amount of years in counterintelligence. You'll never find him. And that kind of stuck with me. And I was like, oh, maybe
that's cool.
Maybe that's where I need to go. And that's what happened.
All right, so you've joined now. Where is boot camp at? Where do you get sent for that?
Yeah, so everybody in the Air Force, at least in my generation, goes through Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas.
Okay. All right, so was there ever a time when you get off the plane, whatever, or bus, and you go, all right, this was the wrong decision, or you felt the whole time that's where I needed to be?
I was grinning from ear to ear. And listen, like I say, I tell people I fell for the government's long-term recruitment strategy. It wasn't just the movies, but then because of the movies and my desire to join, I was active in scouting all the way up to high school. Our high school had a junior ROTC program, so I was active in that all the way until I left. So I feel like my early childhood years and my formative years were spent preparing for the military.
Okay.
So when I finally got to step foot on a military base, I guarantee I was grinning ear to ear.
So most of the people we've had on were Marine Corps, Army. But so what's the Air Force boot camp like? I mean, how is it different than the other branches of the military?
For me, and I kept in touch with a lot of my buddies who went to various branches. The biggest difference was mine was short. I think they've extended Air Force basic training at the time, but mine was only, I think, 6 weeks long, whereas my buddies in Marine Corps were there for double that, 12 weeks. But as far as the environment, and I know that the military branches, we like to pick at each other and, there's always these memes going around and some guy with a silver platter and a suit on bringing you your lobster for dinner in Air Force basic training. But it's just not the case. I think the military as a whole, the Department of Defense knows how to conduct basic training and knows what it takes to break somebody down and build them back up as an airman, soldier, sailor, Marine, whatever. And the process looks the same across the board.
Okay.
I don't think it was that much different.
So what was after basic training? What's after that?
Yeah, so for us, we call it tech school.
Okay.
Other branches would call it A school, but that's you get assigned your job either before you leave or while you're in basic. And so very shortly after that, you go to your tech school.
And that's how you got OSI? Was that?
So I started off as an enlisted airman. You can't go straight into OSI. So you have to start somewhere in the Air Force. And my first job was security forces. There was kind of a longer route to get there. I came in with a guaranteed contract to be a SEER specialist, which is it stands for Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. You teach pilots and special operators and folks going to some high-risk environments. You teach them survival skills. And like I said, I had a guaranteed contract for that job, but once I started to learn a little bit about it, still in basic training, I decided that wasn't the job I wanted to do. and found myself volunteering to go into security forces. And I didn't think that the law enforcement aspect is what I was really going to be into. But I found a love for law enforcement there that continued on. So that was it was very fortunate.
So what does security forces do? Like, what is your job?
Yeah, so security forces in the Air Force, it's kind of dual hatted between military police and security, right? But that's your ground force element in the Air Force, because we don't have an infantry. So who protects air bases? It's security forces, but then you also do the law enforcement mission as well. And because of that, there's a lot of great opportunities in that job. I've got buddies who've gone to Army Airborne School because there are certain bases who are dedicated as air base defense groups, and their mission is, if things were to pop off tomorrow with Iran, after some air battles, one of the first things that would probably happen if we're putting boots on the ground is the Army Rangers are going to go and see some airfields. Well, once they've got it under control, the Army, the 82nd Airborne, whatever, eventually a bunch of security forces guys are going to roll into that air base.
I gotcha.
They're going to build a perimeter, and they're going to hold that perimeter so that the Army can then project outwards and do their job.
That's really interesting you say that, because one of the things that Brian and I love about this segment that we've been doing is learning so much, because he and I hadn't served, and I learned something each time. And so your pictures that came through, we did the promotion for the show. I was like, who in the Air Force has that much weaponry on them? And I didn't. Yeah. I never thought about it. You have to secure your own place, and you have your own military police. I hadn't thought about that being that part of the Air Force. It's kind of cool.
So where'd you end up doing your tech school?
That's also at Lackland Air Force Base.
Okay, and then after that, where's your first
duty station? Was Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico.
Ooh, was that different?
It was very different. I mean, I grew up in the land of the pines, flat. Yeah. Texas wasn't that much different, and for the most part, through basic and tech school, you're kind of confined to San Antonio. So it's a city, but, it's still hot, whatever. I get to New Mexico, and there's mountains there, and I'd never seen mountains before.
Oh, wow.
That was new. But then it's high desert, very different, but I learned to love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's where you're learning your skills that you're going to use in the Air Force?
Well, so you learn all your skills at tech school.
Tech school. So
and when they push you out to your first duty station, you're considered mission ready. You're a 3-level airman. So, you have someone doing some on-the-job training with you. You've got some more upgrade training, but you're handed a gun and you're securing stuff day one.
You got a job now.
You got a job now.
Yeah.
Okay. I am learning this. Like when Trent and I worked together years ago at a place where we did a lot of government facilities, and Bowling Air Force Base was that's probably the only Air Force base I've ever been on. But now that's a totally different.
Yeah, up in the Navy Yard.
Yeah, it's a little cocoon of Department of Defense and everything else. It's like in that whole area. Yeah, that was definitely a learning experience.
Now, you mentioned that you were in high school and you'd already heard about, Iraq and Afghanistan. We've had 9/11 happen, and you're in the police force. Are you thinking that eventually I'm going to go to Afghanistan? You end up going to Afghanistan, right? Is that?
I did, yeah. And for security forces, it was a guarantee unless. So my wife, her and I actually met in tech school. We've been married 17 years now, but her first duty station was Mstr Air Force Base, Montana, out in the nuke fields. So she had to get a special clearance and special additional training to guard nuclear warheads. And those people weren't deploying much because it took a special person to do that job.
Yeah.
But if you weren't in the missile field, you were almost guaranteed you were getting a deployment within your first 2-3 years in security forces.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I hit the ground. I think I got to New Mexico. I think it was like March of 2008, and probably by October I was already slotted to go to Iraq.
Oh wow!
And I wound up missing that deployment because my wife was exiting the Air Force and she was pregnant with our first child. We moved quickly. If you didn't pick that one up.
Doing the math.
But I told my chain of command, like, hey, my fiance's moving here. She's pregnant. Baby's due. And they were gracious enough to let me miss that first deployment and see the birth of my oldest. And because of that, I never made it to Iraq. All of my deployments were Afghanistan or elsewhere, but I completely missed out on the Iraq theater of war. Not that I'm sad about it.
Sure.
Iraq sucks, right? But
Yeah. All right. So you're getting your deployment to Afghanistan. Are you aware of what you're going to be doing? Like, or is it just they bring you in and this is life? I mean,
yeah, I'd say I had a really good awareness, and the Air Force, again, during height of the war and during my time, the Air Force had a really unique way of deploying troops because I think most people think of the Army or maybe the Marine Corps when you think about combat deployments, and for the most part, the Army, if you're 1st Battalion, 503rd Airborne, whatever, you and all your buddies are going together. You know what I mean? The whole unit deploys.
mm-hmm.
Whereas in the Air Force, they kind of pick and choose. So they'll send a tasker to a wing, which for us in New Mexico is the 49th Wing, 49th Security Forces Squadron. They'll send a tasker and they say, hey, we need 13 bodies. And you pick 13 bodies from within the squadron and you build them into a package. And then when you go down range, you're joined by 13 bodies from this base and 13 bodies from this base. And it's, because the Air Force is a smaller and leaner force, and, whereas Fort Bragg, for example, if you're talking about the 82nd Airborne, you've got a bunch of different infantry units on that base. So if one leaves, you still got guys left behind to guard the base and respond to contingencies or whatever. If you wiped out the entire 49th Security Forces, there's no more Security Forces members on Holloman Air Force Base.
Gotcha.
We are all they got. So, so they would call them these, I think, Air Expeditionary Forces, and AEF is what they would build out of all these different bases. So the tasker would come down and they'd say, hey, here's what you're going to be doing on this deployment, whether it was guarding a prison or convoy operations. My first deployment, I hit the jackpot. I got to do what was called a flyaway security team. So in security forces, one of those cool opportunities you have is the Phoenix Raven program. And you go through this school, you learn some combatives, you learn how to deal with all these different situations, and you become like a in-flight security body. You wear a flight suit, you're considered air crew, and you fly all over the world transporting cargo, troops, whatever. But the whole idea behind it is anytime a plane, an Air Force asset, lands outside of an established perimeter, you've got security guys. So I got to do what I call Phoenix Raven Light or Diet Phoenix Raven and do flyaway security. So my first deployment, I wore a flight suit with a armored vest, carried an M4, and got to fly basically every country that touches Afghanistan and every air base in Afghanistan to some extent. I got to visit. And
so does this include like high ups in the military that are going to different places?
So they'll typically have
generals or anything.
Yeah, like the Secretary of the Air Force has his own personal security detail of OSI agents. In theater, sometimes we would get some of those guys on our planes, but the goal for us was we might fly to Kabul International Airport, be able to get off the plane there, because it's a big military base on one side. Get off the plane there, grab some chow, and then the next place that plane was stopping was the middle of nowhere desert in Afghanistan to resupply the 3rd Special Forces Group who are out there living in caves or whatever, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So when you're landing out in the middle of the desert, there is no security. So me and my partner would be the first ones off the plane. We'd hold security. They could do whatever they were doing, whether it was cargo, passengers, whatever the mission was. The air crews could do that. We had security. The bad part about the job is if the Taliban were to attack that airplane while we're on the ground, the protocol is for the plane to leave. And we're sitting there on the ground.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've got some funny stories about that kind of stuff if y'all want to hear it.
Yeah, of course. That's awesome. That's why we're here.
Yeah, so
doesn't sound funny, but go ahead.
Yeah, so there was, and I'll start with I'll start with a a real world. I don't know, kind of not an intense story, but for me at the time as an 18-year-old kid in Afghanistan, first deployment, it almost got pretty real. But me and my partner, we had parked at this one little strip, and there was a fence next to where the planes parked, and there was an Afghan village right there, and we'd been there. Hell, I'd probably been there 30 times in the 7-8 months that I was in Afghanistan. But on this one mission, we could see this guy. There was this green like tarp laid over the fence, and we could see this guy squatting down behind it, and he had this huge metal bowl, and he was messing with something. So we're trying to, not be suspicious, but get an eye on what this guy's doing. We're going up to the flight deck of the aircraft, trying to look over the fence that we can't see. And finally, my partner, Corey, he says, hey, I think that guy's building an explosive. And I went up, I was the team leader for that mission. So I go up and I talk to the aircraft commander, and I tell him what we think's going on. And he's like, well, what do we do? And I said, well, like, here's the protocol. You guys take off, leave us on the ground, and we'll see what happens. And sure enough, when the plane starts to take off and we see this guy start to get active and he's peeking and he sees us still on the ground. And finally, me and Corey turned and we put our guns on him. And we just started yelling at him, probably, hey, what are you doing? He doesn't understand us anyway, but we're yelling at him. And this dude takes off running. So plane's gone. We get on the radio. We contacted the Army because they did have patrols in the area. And they said they were going to dispatch somebody out. Eventually we got another plane to come in and pick us up. And we found out the next day that they recovered an IED.
Wow.
So it's our guess this guy was just waiting for the plane to take off, and he was going to try to throw it, over the fence and try to damage the plane while we were on takeoff or whatever.
I'll tell you what's amazing about that story, first off, when we talk about this, is one of the things I've also learned on the show, how much responsibility an 18-year-old kid has.
Oh, I tell you.
I'm 55 now, and thinking about how much responsibility you just had to diagnose something, go to the pilot of a plane, and then tell him what he should do and what the protocol is, and then go engage. I mean, wow.
Yeah, I know. There's times my wife, I can't unload the dishwasher, and you're only... you're friggin' letting a plane leave while you're standing there. Holy cow!
And you don't realize it in the moment.
Yeah.
You don't realize the value of the training you get in the military, even that young. We had another incident. This one, we flew into an old Russian airstrip. It was in Kunduz, Afghanistan, and this one always sticks out in my head every time I'd fly there because it reminded me of that scene from the movie Gladiator where he's walking through the fields of wheat. It's just golden. There was these golden fields all around. I mean, it was absolutely beautiful. I tell you, if it wasn't for the Taliban, Afghanistan would be great.
Oh wow,
it's so beautiful there.
That's the first time I've ever heard that.
Oh,
no, I see pictures of other, like, I know y'all seen pictures of Iran in the 1960s.
Yep.
It's a beautiful place, and everybody's enjoying life.
And Kabul, Afghanistan was the same way in the 60s. I mean, if you put up a picture of Kabul and New York, Broad Street, or Broadway or whatever, in the 60s, and you'd see like the way the women were dressed, the guys, the cars are driving, you wouldn't know which was which.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So we rolled into Kunduz and we landed on the ground there, and we'd been there a couple times. This time was different. This time there was an old blown out Russian air traffic control tower. And at the top of this tower, they had some sandbags set up, and there were two snipers up there. And I'm like, well, this is new. And the engines are still running. I get off the plane, me and my partner, and we're doing our thing. And this guy comes walking out of a hole in the side of this building. He's got a beard down to here, great long hair. You could tell he's full sleeve tattoos, flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows, and some 511 pants. And I'm like, this dude's an operator. So I'm already excited. He comes walking over and he's like, are you a Raven? And I was like, yeah. I wasn't, but in the moment, I'm not going to say no. And he's like, right on, man. He's like, I was security forces too. And I'm like, oh man, what are you doing now? And he's like, State Department. I'm like, all right, not tracking.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know what you're doing here today? And I said, no. And he's like, we're yelling over the the plane engines, but he's like, you're picking up the ambassador to Afghanistan. And I'm like, this is cool. Suddenly, one of the snipers cracks off a round, and I'm alert. And I see popping over this hill this F-250, F-350 dually truck, and there's a guy standing in the back, Mexican Federale style, with a machine gun mounted to this cage. And this diesel truck takes off over this hill, and they start going down, and I hear this minigun opening up, and guys come running out of the hole in this building. They've got the ambassador between two of his State Department diplomatic security agents, and they're running kind of heads down, and I'm like, we're under attack. I'm amped up, but I don't see any threats.
Yeah.
And they're like, come on, get on the plane, get on the plane. So we rush on in this dang plane and we do a hot takeoff. I mean, it's kind of like when you're hot braking, but in a C-130, the whole plane is rattling. They've got the engine spooled up. And when they take the brake off, you fly sideways in your seat and you're up in the air in no time. And I'm amped. And this guy sitting next to me, so I take my headset off and I lean over. I'm like, what's going on? And he leans over, cool as a cucumber, and he goes, cows. And I said,
Cows?
what? Cows. There's cows on the runway. We're having to clear them off so the AMBO doesn't miss his next meeting. They were using sniper fire machine guns to scare away cows. And I mean, if you want to talk about going from a
You thought you were in the, and you were.
I thought we were about to get some. The Taliban was coming for us. This guy said, cows.
Oh, man,
Yeah.
that was
And
incredible.
that's honestly, guys, that's in my experience, that's combat, that's deployments. You know, it's levels, it's highs and lows.
It's chaos.
And sometimes you're all jacked up and you're ready to get after it, and then it's just cows on the runway.
Wow.
That's
Holy
wild.
cow.
Yeah.
How long were you in Afghanistan?
So that deployment was typically the Air Force does 6-month rotations. We got extended a little bit, so around 7.5, 8 months for my first deployment.
Oh, so you've been multiple times.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Second time, better, worse, same?
They progressively got worse. Yeah. So second deployment, it was to Saudi Arabia. And we've got a little, or I don't know if we still have it or not, but it was to a compound for American service members that were helping to train the Saudis. You know, so the Saudis buy a lot of military equipment from us, fighter jets, tanks, whatever. And whenever they do that, it comes with a package. And I said, well, you know, we're going to sell, let's say it's a tank. We'll sell you the tank, but we're also going to sell you, you know, training from a couple of tank drivers and then some tank mechanics and the guys who fuel it up.
Mm-hmm.
And they spend time over there teaching the Saudis or whatever military we're working with on how to use that stuff. So there was a compound there that they lived on. And I was really mad when I got sent there because in my mind, again, I'm going here to babysit these families that live on this compound in Saudi Arabia. There's men and women dying in Afghanistan every day, and here I am. You know, we had a pool. You could go to a local restaurant and have a couple drinks and get a steak dinner. But it was actually pretty cool. So when I first got there, you know, before you deploy, actually, you go through that pre-deployment training where you're getting trained up. You know, my first deployment, I went to the Raven School and I learned all that stuff. This one, I went down to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. We had a program down there at the time called Brave Defender. And you live in an austere environment. You know, it's out in the woods. You're living in huts, and you're just wargaming. You're clearing buildings. You're doing patrols. You're doing all this combat-related stuff that falls within the security forces mission. And you're getting trained up. So there was a tech sergeant there who I guess I had impressed. And when we got on the ground, like the second day we were there, I got pulled and they said, hey, you're going to be the NCOIC of this gate complex. You're going to have 23 airmen, you know, working for you, and you're responsible for all the foot traffic that comes through, all of the vehicle traffic, and then our main search pit for anyone driving onto the base. They come through you, and you got to search the vehicles. So I was on shift one day, and I get a call down in the search pit. Hey, Sergeant McCoy, we think we got something. And it turned out there was a vehicle trying to get on base with an IED. So, you know, we had to evacuate that area, cordon off the area, call the EOD techs to come in. And I got a medal for that operation. So, you know, it was hard towards the end to say I didn't do anything or, you know, I didn't contribute because there was a real threat there. And there was another kind of a turning point for my career, you know, because you want it to make rank because you want it to pay, but you never wanted the responsibility, especially me. You know, I liked being responsible for myself.
You're a doer
and doing the job.
Yeah.
And here I am thrust into this mantle of leadership. Not that big of a deal, but anyway, I think it was an F-16 had gone down in Afghanistan. I remember a plane had crashed. And somehow the tasker came to us in Saudi Arabia, and they said, hey, we're going to put together a team of guys to go forward to sit on this plane and secure it until, the Air Force can get a crash recovery crew out there, but there's, when it comes to our fighter jets, there's sensitive equipment in there, and the avionics or the way it works, all this stuff. So they were gonna send a group of guys forward to sit on this thing, so the Iranians couldn't get it, I'm guessing. And so I got picked for that mission. I got to do all the mission planning for it and
cool.
Get everything approved. Never wound up going. They decided, I think they just probably dropped a bomb on the thing. But, up until, the hour before we were supposed to go, I was in charge. I planned it. I picked my team, and it really gave me an opportunity to do some mission planning and see what that would be like. And I enjoyed it. And I thought, this is something that I could do, because everybody in the military can relate. You've got good bosses and bad bosses. And eventually there comes a time where you just got to say, man, I could do this better myself.
Yeah.
And if it means me doing it or working for that guy, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting opportunity.
All right. So, did you re-up after your first 4 years, I guess?
I sure did.
Okay.
I think, in between those two deployments, I had to re-up a little bit early because in security forces, there's two different, you call them shred outs. And it's like changing jobs. You got to go to a whole different school, but they still fall under that security forces umbrella. So one of those shreds, your alpha shred, is your canine handlers. So think of a military working dog or a police working dog. You can specialize in that and do that for your career. Then we have a B shred, which is called combat arms. And that job is responsible for all of the weapons training and weapons maintenance across the Air Force. So I got to be a full-time firearms instructor for 3 years. And that was my role when I first went to Saudi Arabia. I got pulled out of probably working in an armory. So in conjunction with that cross train, I needed more retainability in the service. So I think I didn't even make it to the end of my first initial 4-year contract, and I'd already re-upped. Because the goal for me was always 20 years in the Air Force.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So did you pull the whole 20?
No, I'm actually in the reserves right now.
Okay.
So I did 12 years active and then switched over to the reserves. And
Gotcha.
I'm at 18 right now, but I just re-upped again at Monument Terrace for 3 more years.
Wow.
So I'll retire with 21 years of service.
Did you do it in a ceremony at Monument Terrace?
I did, yeah.
Dude, man, that is freaking awesome.
They loved it.
Yeah. How cool is that? I wish I'd have seen that. How long ago did you do that?
That was 3 weeks ago now. 4 weeks
Man,
ago?
congratulations.
Man, you were probably, that's cool.
It might have been the weekend, the week after you and I had met, Trent.
Oh, that's really
Wow.
cool. Hey, let me ask you this, and you don't have to answer this at all, and I could be completely wrong. When we left Afghanistan, that famous picture of the guys trying to hold on to the plane, the cargo ship that was leaving, I don't know if you have familiarity with that type of flight and that type of plane, but wasn't that an Air Force plane that was leaving? Am I wrong on that?
It was, yeah.
It was an Air Force plane.
I believe those were Air Force C-17s.
Yeah. So would you have been on something like that? And what would you have done with people trying to
Hang on
and come on? What would you have done in that situation?
Right. So that is, part of that role that I talked about, those Phoenix Ravens within the Air Force. They fly around on C-17s. My plane in my first tour was the C-130, which has the propellers.
Yeah.
So C-17's a little bigger than a C-130. It's got jet engines. But yeah, so they may have had Ravens on that plane securing it.
Yeah.
And if there's guys hanging on, I mean, the biggest thing is keeping people from rushing inside the plane and causing harm. Obviously, the rules on the ground at that time, I'm not sure what directives they had because they were obviously transporting people out. I mean, I've seen pictures of those planes filled with refugees.
Yeah.
But as far as people hanging on the outside, I mean, I think once the plane is buttoned up,
Yeah. It's just on them.
unfortunately, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And if you're going to hang on to the side of an airplane that's taken off and think you're going to make it, that's unfortunate. But
what that always reminded me of, somebody is willing to do that, then stay.
yeah,
I mean, that's all you really need to know about their lifestyle and what they have. If they'd rather do that and stay where they were. That's just amazing to me.
Hey, take me through when you've done your tours or whatever, and you're finished with your, I guess, full time, and now you're in reserves, right? Mm-hmm. So what is that? I mean, can you explain what that looks like as opposed to
like when you step away from active duty into the reserve role because you're going to go get a regular civilian job and start your family or build your family a little more, that kind of thing. Yeah. Right.
Is it similar to what we think National Guards is? You're only
it can be. Okay. It can be. So the reserve program and the Air National Guard exists as well. There's different programs underneath there, and I'll start with you have the AGR positions, which is an Air Guard Reserve, Active Guard Reserve. So you could be a full-time employee of the Air National Guard or the Air Force Reserves and work 365 days a year, just like an active duty member, but you fall underneath that component. So some people do that. Then you have, in my case, your traditional reservist, which would be, when you hear the news on the radio, all it is 1 week in a month and 2 weeks in the summer.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what a traditional reservist is. My program that I fall under is called the IMA program. So that's the Individual Mobilization Augmentee. And our program, versus being assigned to an Air Reserve base or an Air Reserve unit, I'm assigned to an active duty billet. So somewhere in the Air Force is an active duty guy sitting in a chair, and on paper, I'm the ghost that sits behind him. And if he were to get activated and go forward to deploy, I would then get activated to do his job stateside.
Gotcha.
So the IMA program, for me, it's great because it's very flexible. I do have basically 24 individual reservist days to complete a year. So to me, that equates to essentially a weekend a month. And then I do have a 2-week annual tour over the summer where, I'm activated for that 2 weeks and I go to a base here in the United States and do my job for 2 weeks. But I could choose if I want to do a weekend a month or if I wanted to knock out all 24 of those days in one stretch.
So where is that? Is it in Virginia somewhere?
No, right now I'm assigned to a base in Alabama.
Okay.
Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama.
So how do you get into Lynchburg? How do you go from Texas to New Mexico to Afghanistan? How do you land?
Where did you call home? Because you said your wife was pregnant.
Yeah.
So where is home?
I'll lay it out real quick. So
sure.
First duty station is Holloman Air Force Base.
Yeah.
Deployed to Afghanistan out of there. Became a firearms instructor, and they moved me to Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama.
Okay.
Second deployment happens out of there, the one in Saudi Arabia. And then I find the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. So now I have the time and service. I've built up my resume because really when OSI is recruiting, especially enlisted airmen, they're looking for the best of the best. So you've got to work on your resume. You've got to have some deployments, and you've got to be a top performer to get in. But I was recruited, went through the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia, and became an OSI special agent. During that process, I got new orders. So this time it was to Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska. Oof. And I remember calling my wife from the Law Enforcement Training Center and telling her, "Hey, babe, we're going to Alaska." And she just broke down crying.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, it was.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh.
It was my favorite assignment, and she ended up loving it. At the end of our 3 years there, we were trying to extend for another 3.
Okay.
Alaska was just incredible, but and we had talked about moving back there when I left the Air Force, but the winters were just a little bit too long for her. Mm-hmm. But I think me and the kids all would have went back in a heartbeat. So from Elmendorf, Alaska, I got my third deployment. This time back to Afghanistan, and this was my first deployment as an OSI agent.
Oh, wow.
So there we're doing counterintelligence and counterterrorism, and we're protecting the base. And the whole mission, there's a lot of different missions in OSI, just like anything. But our mission at a task force level for OSI special agents is what we call keeping the airfield green. If the airfield is in a green status, and that means planes can take off and land. That means bombs can go where they need to go, troops can go where they need to go, supplies, etc. Whenever the Taliban would shoot rockets at our base, or a ground attack was happening, something like that, planes couldn't take off. All movement stopped. People had to shelter and take cover. So our job was to proactively seek out the terrorists who were trying to launch rockets, plan attacks, plan IEDs, all that stuff, and go out and get them. During that deployment, I lost 6 of my teammates to a motorcycle-borne IED,
Oh my gosh.
and that really affected me. So came home, dealt with PTSD, and that kind of changed the trajectory of where I was going and what I want to do with my life. But from that assignment, I also I got forwarded to Pope Air Force Base, or Pope Army Airfield in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and then co-located with a unit on Fort Bragg. So I got to do a lot of really cool stuff. That last assignment, it was underneath the Joint Special Operations Command umbrella. So one of those units that we don't really talk about, right? But I got to work with the best our country has to offer, the best our Air Force has to offer. My teammates are guys who there's been books written and movies made about stuff that some of my teammates have done. So for me, it was like stepping into this world where I was an ant amongst giants. And I was just constantly impressed and blessed to be able to stand amongst them and do some of the work we did. But also the imposter syndrome was real for me. It was like, how did I get here and I don't belong here type of thing. But ultimately, I saw that as like the pinnacle of my career.
Sure.
I was doing a lot of really cool stuff. And the thought of going back to the regular Air Force after being in special operations just was not appealing. And because of where I was and the type of work we do, we got a lot of exposure to the FBI's hostage rescue team, which is, it's a full-time tactical team, and I think it's the best in the country as far as their operators go. And you get a lot of guys that come from really high-level units, SEAL teams, high-level Army units, the Air Force, and they join the FBI to go to that team. So I had met some of the guys there, and they convinced me, hey, you've got a background as a special agent already. You do the counter intel stuff. Why don't you join the FBI and, make your way over to us? And so I did part of that. I decided to leave active duty in 2019. I ETS'd, or, my final day on active duty was in June, middle of June. By the middle of July, I was in Quantico at the FBI Academy.
Nice.
And that is what sent me here to Lynchburg.
Okay.
And ultimately what kept me from going to the FBI's hostage rescue teams. Once we landed here, got integrated into this community, me and the family decided we never want to leave.
Yeah.
This area is such a special place.
Well, Quantico is still a couple hours away. How do you? Was it an office, the FBI office?
So the FBI's main office that covers most of Virginia is Richmond Field Office.
Okay.
And then underneath the Richmond Field Office, you've got satellite offices in multiple cities.
Yeah.
So we had an office here in Lynchburg that I was assigned to. And we just loved it.
Great.
Never want to leave.
Yeah.
It's the thing that people don't realize. It's just like you were talking about with the military, with different things responsibilities that people don't think about. Like when, doing background checks and stuff, an FBI agent does that. So they're located in different regional. There's just so many different duties. You don't think like I do. I think of FBI. Oh, you're doing some special investigation, but it's not everybody, right?
You think people know about the New York field office, and you think DC, but the amount of people I actually had a buddy I worked with. I think I'll get this story right. He was down in, I think, Pittsylvania County, and he had knocked on this lady's door. I think she was being defrauded by somebody, so he was there to let her know, hey, that's not your boyfriend. That's some guy sitting in Jamaica, and he's stealing all your money, type of thing. Well, he knocked on the door, and he showed her his badge, says, hey, I'm such and such with the FBI. And she said, I'll be right back. She closes the door. Next thing he knows, 2 Pittsylvania County Sheriff's deputies pull up behind him, and they're like, oh, hey, buddy. She said somebody was out here impersonating the FBI.
Oh, wow.
And she could not wrap her mind around the FBI being in Pitt County, Virginia. You know what I mean? Out in the middle of nowhere. But they really do. You can go everywhere. So, that became my career for the next 5.5 years. I'm proud to say I was a part of the FBI and proud of the work that I did there. But ultimately, not wanting to move, stress of being in law enforcement for 18 years, or at that time 16 years, 17 years. There was a lot of things that I woke up one morning and said, I don't want to do this anymore.
Sure.
And I've had this side project growing since 2019. So I'm wearing my shirt now, but Index Archery. And I'll go back, Trent, to the training that we talked about early on, because the military does a great job, especially the Air Force. They do a great job giving you the skills you need to do your job. But then there's all this other training you get, and you do it every year. And a lot of times you roll your eyes. And one of those trainings is about mental health and resiliency and suicide awareness and all this stuff. And you're like, oh, this again.
Yeah.
But when I got home from that third deployment to Afghanistan and I was dealing with the loss to my team, the things from that training started popping up, and I realized that I was in a bad place, and I needed to get some help.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's a much longer story, but ultimately that help started with a bow and arrow.
Okay.
And that bow and arrow made me acknowledge that I was having this problem.
Yeah.
It made me go tell my commander. It made me walk into the mental health group on base and talk to a counselor for the first time. And it led to all these good things and all this growth.
Yeah.
So in 2019, as soon as I graduated Quantico, I decided to launch Index Archery, and with the goal of just letting people know, hey, this worked for me, and it could work for you too. And very quickly introducing people to archery and then watching them spend upwards of $2,000-$3,000 on a complete archery setup made me feel like crap. So I turned it into a nonprofit. And now what we do is we pay for 100% of the equipment that heroes need to get started. So we work with veterans, law enforcement, first responders, and people struggling post-traumatic stress, because they're a hero to us because of what they did for their country, but they're also a hero because they're willing to face their demons and face that storm and do something about their mental health. So it doesn't have to be a service member. It could be an extraordinary civilian who's ready to take their mental health into their own hands. But we pay for all of the equipment they need to get started. We mentor them, and we help them get fully integrated into their local archery community. And so that could be, bow hunting, but it could also be a 3D league, an indoor league, with the goal of just, one, it's your mental health, it's your physical health. We get them outdoors, we get them moving, we get them doing something. And then it's the social wellness aspect too. Yeah. They find a community in that. For a lot of service members, when they leave, they miss that camaraderie.
Yeah.
And they miss, every now and then you got to have that buddy who just calls you an a-hole and you laugh about it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And when you're shooting archery, you
Me
find
and Trent.
that. Yeah.
He's been calling me an a-hole for 30 years.
I'm never going to stop.
So for me, the archery community is just this amazing, supportive, mind-blowing community. And that's the biggest gift that I give these guys. They think the bow's cool. Yeah. The bow's just the start. When I let you know that this community's out there and you get integrated into it, that's the best thing that I can give somebody.
So I was fortunate when I was a kid, young teenager, my brother and I, my dad introduced us to archery. I don't hunt with it anymore, but as a young kid, it taught me so much. And we were part of the Isaac Walton League. Mm-hmm. We would go to 20-yard shoots every Saturday night, and we would target practice competition, and we would do that. It's funner than bowling. It was just, it was so much time. And you just learn so many skills about concentration and focus and confidence in yourself. It was a huge thing as a teenager to be able to do that.
Yep.
Yeah. That's really admirable, man. So are you doing this? Do you help nationally? Is it a local group that you're doing this with?
We have what I call ambassadors in multiple states, and right now, a lot of the work we do is one-on-one. The majority of it happens right here around Lynchburg, Virginia. But our long-term goal over the next 4 years now, I hope to build a wellness center here in Central Virginia.
Nice.
And the goal would be my ambassadors, wherever in the country, identify heroes in need. They send them to us for a 5-day intensive retreat. It's going to be archery-centric, but our goal is to introduce them to as many wellness modalities as we can during that 5-day period. And then when you send them back home, they've got a bow in one hand, they've got a couple other tools in this hand, and then the ambassador works them into their local community at that point.
Yeah. Wow.
And I stole the idea. We've got a great psychologist working with us now, Dr. Leah Kaler, but I'd met her through the FBI and through a process that I went through. So anytime you're involved in a shooting or a mass casualty event or something like that in the FBI, they send you through a similar program. For me, I went out to Florida and stayed in this really nice hotel, and they had booked out the conference center. And for 4 days, it was just that. You start at 7 a.m, and it's 30-minute or hour-long blocks where they're introducing you to all these new things, and you're getting time with a therapist. And at the end of the day, on the last 2 days, you kind of choose your own adventure, right? It's hey, we've got Tai Chi in this room, and we've got grief counseling over here, and we've got yoga here, and massages, and pick a couple things you're interested in, but also pick a couple things you're not interested in.
Oh yeah.
So you get the exposure because you never know. And some of those things for me, one of them was art therapy. I had no interest in art therapy, but man, was it a game changer for me.
Oh.
Because I've been able to take art therapy and translate that into arrow building. So in archery, building your arrows, and now there's these companies that make these fancy wraps that you can put on the end of it.
Yeah.
So a military veteran, Dustin Adams, he's got a business called Adams Precision Archery, and he does all these custom builds, and they're beautiful, and some of them are funky and wacky, and you can really express yourself. But he supplies us with the materials, and I can have a veteran, whatever's speaking to them in the moment, focus on some of that trauma, those negative experiences, and pick out your vein color, pick out your wrap color. Let's build this arrow.
Oh.
That's pretty neat.
And now let's go, let's go shoot it at a steel buck, a target made out of steel. It's going to blow that sucker up.
Yeah.
And it's that release, right? Is you pour that negative energy into that arrow and you build it, and then you go destroy it.
Yeah.
And you get a release from that.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
How long you been doing that? Sorry.
So started mentoring in 2019, official nonprofit in 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you get your funding?
It's all donor driven right now.
Okay.
Well, I can't say that. This year we won our first grant from Virginia Wildlife.
Okay.
So we did win a grant this year, but it's always been donor driven, and we're 100% volunteers. But we are looking for corporate sponsorships. We're looking for more grant opportunities, and building this wellness center is an ambitious goal. It's going to take a lot.
Yeah.
But hopefully, Coca-Cola or somebody will want
Sure.
to get behind us.
Or hydrogen water, maybe.
Yeah. maybe
You
purified.
look even better, healthier than you did when we started.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So how does somebody get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, so our website, there's a contact block. So that's endexarchery.org. Indexarchery.org. And that's a military phrase that stands for end of exercise. So
Okay.
endexarchery.org.
All right.
You can also find us on social media, Instagram, Facebook. You can shoot us a DM. We're still small enough that, I'm answering every
Sure.
DM I get.
Cool. All right, you're listening to Life, Liberty, Happiness. We've been talking with Air Force Master Sergeant Jay McCoy. Thank you for being with us today. Before you leave, we always ask one last question. If you could spend 24-hour period with one person, who would it be, and where? Anybody in history, doesn't matter, but where would you spend with them, and who would it be?
Gotta go Jesus.
It's a favorite.
That is a good answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I think 24 hours is with Jesus in Capernaum or Jerusalem or wherever.
So cool.
Yeah, that'd be something awesome.
We have a drama segment that we get into after you leave here, and that's actually on my list. He's gotten me hooked into starting to watch Chosen.
Oh, it's so good.
Oh,
is
I'm
so
in
good.
I'm in 5th season right now, and today we had lunch. He goes, "Don't tell me anything that's going on." So,
No.
yeah, that's awesome, man.
Well, appreciate you being on the show, and good luck to you. And thanks for all the information. It was terrific.
Oh man, it was fantastic. And I like saying this to others that have done this, that come talk about helping others. You served our country, and you're still serving our country, man. I appreciate everything you're doing. That's
Thank you.
cool.
It's an honor.
Yeah, awesome. Good stuff. Good to have you.
Need insurance in Bedford? I'm David Honecker, your local State Farm agent. Whether it's home, auto, or life insurance, we've got you covered with personalized service and great rates. Let us help you protect what matters most with the reliability and trust of State Farm. Call us today at 540-586-8194 or visit our office that is conveniently located at 1232 East Lynchburg Salem Turnpike in Bedford, right beside the Walmart. We are your go-to State Farm agent. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Call us today.